How we doing, guys? My name is Jean, and this is my intermission video from the last one of episode 4, I think, episode 3. It's a Hillsong. The one episode that I just did about my intention kind of threw me off as far as which episode I'm on, but you get the drift. But this is basically a recap of what we've already learned. So far, I've gotten into Michelle Remembers, and with Satanic Panic and how it was created back in the very early 80s, I believe 1980. And it was in a 1983 when the McMartin case came into play. Now, and then I took you guys on a journey through Hillsong and what Hillsong was and what it was about and the allegations that had happened. The one thing that I hope if anybody watches these, if you've gotten this far, thank you. Um, But the one thing that I'm just trying to help do is to kind of put out there and show you guys what delusion and psychosis look like. With Michelle Remembers, it came out many years later that Michelle had DID. Um, Identity, it's basically an identity disorder, right? And then that was your psychosis. That is what psychosis looks like, is somebody who believes what they're seeing with their eyes and they're believing with their ears of delusions that are not real. Um, Many people with schizophrenia suffer from psychosis. Many people from other mental disorders suffer from psychosis. Um, you don't have to be labeled crazy to be in a psychosis. When you're in that psychosis, yes, it's you're would be like crazy, I guess. But I don't like to really say that because you can end up having a crash out. I actually don't really like that term, but women even who are going through postpartum sometimes can go into a psychosis. We've seen that throughout the country of when women harm their own children and why, and because they're believing ideations or hearing voices telling them to do it. That's psychosis. When it's in religion, Michelle is definitely the best example I can give you to start with. In the McMartin case, the psychosis of that was the mom who took in her 2-year-old child because she believed that it was being harmed by somebody at the school. And that case is very wildly up for debate, but it came out after she self-harmed herself that she had schizophrenia. And she was also a severe alcoholic. Drugs and alcohol can also play a role of psychosis. The most infamous one is acid. You know, you're seeing hallucinations, you're hearing things, and it's not real. Magic mushrooms, same thing. You're seeing things that are not actually there. And I'm not looking for people to deep dive and go into that as far as on the spiritual side of it. I'm sticking to science with this one, okay? And I know in therapy, they use psychedelic drugs to help with therapy. That's quite different. That's under a controlled situation with an actual therapist who does know what they're doing. But if you're just a willy dilly random person and you're dropping acid or you're eating some fun mushrooms, then you end up in a certain kind of psychosis. Now, when we get into Hillsong, that's exactly what I think kind of happened. The delusions that Carl Lentz, which is the one who ran Hillsong in New York City, in Manhattan in 2010, who decided to start it, I think it started out with delusion. It started out with ill intent delusion. I say ill intent because I think it was a self involved intent. It wasn't selfish. It became selfish, but it was more about self involvement about him and the gentleman that he was starting it with, Brian. My goodness, Brian Houston's son. So, spreading that delusion or shared psychosis Well, shared psychosis, I'm going to get into that in a second and mostly what that looks like. But shared delusions is basically his sermons of what he was telling people of how to overcome this or how to overcome that. How do you tell an addict and convince an addict that recovery is this and recovery is that when you yourself are still using or doing? That's kind of how I'm seeing it. It's hypocritical. And to me, he's a walking hypocrite. Sorry, buddy. But the one thing I give you credit for is you decided not to pursue the religious community when it comes to preaching. Um, you do you, dude. Just, you know, don't be around a lot of people, I guess. He is actually the least harmful person in all of this research that I've been doing. He's the one that caused the least harm. Same thing with, I'd say, actually, I can't even say that for Michelle because her book itself caused a lot of harm. And I mean, and Carl did too, but those allegations were never actually proven. So I'm going to move on from that. Same thing with Brian um, Houston. He wasn't actually convicted. So he was set free from the first one, and that's why Hillsong closed and blah blah blah. And then now he's didn't learn his lesson. He's out there preaching, and so much so that he tried to. I think I talked about this part, but he tried to connect himself into Donald Trump and his this administration. Um, Brian Houston saw something, and I know what he saw, but his team, this administration, actually had enough sense, at least for this one, and was like, "Yeah, no, dude." And that happened in December of 2019. But it was for a faith briefing, and they never let him into the White House. So he's still practicing his thing, and he's still, an evangelical. I don't know if he's still preaching Pentecostal, but evangelical is pretty up there. We see it now. I'm not even afraid to say the realist side of evangelicalism because I'm going to get into it. So, yeah, that's what we've learned so far. In the McMartin case, I think the most disturbing thing with that one, aside from children being said to be harmed, was the fact that we all walked away disbelievers and we didn't believe those kids. And, but that one is so controversial for good reason because if you can see it or understand it from this way, that I've noticed, and I've even had people say this to me. If you hear that quote, I know I say it a lot. People don't do shit unless it happens to them personally. History is kind of like the same thing. Why do you think we keep repeating this? This shit has been going on for centuries. Actually, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. Because it has been going on for centuries, except in the 1800s, it broke from Catholicism into Protestantism. Protestantism. Sorry, I'm hard with the isms for me to say them out, just to pronounce them. But the one thing that I have learned, and this is no disrespect, but this is just what I learned, is that if you put Christianity up top, right, and you have Catholicism, and you branch down off of it, is everything else. And what I mean is, I believe stuff like Pentecostal, evangelical, you can actually, it's kind of a mixture of all Christianities, but on the extreme. But that didn't come up until the 1800s. Protestant, I think John Smith didn't actually come up with that book until the 1800s. Whereas, Catholicism, you could take it all the way back, like centuries upon centuries upon centuries, like to you hit a wall, so to speak, of before Catholicism or, Catholics. Obviously, you have Judaism, and then, at some point, the Muslims, because that's the three is Christianity, Judea, or Yeah, Judaism, which I believe is what Jewish people study. And then there's Muslims. There's those top three guys. And then before that was Gnostics, which Gnostics were considered paganism. So keep that in mind, that book that you're reading, if you are on the Protestant based side of faith, right? 1800s, which was what, 200 years ago? 18 to 19, 19 to 20, so 226 years roughly. I'm terrible at math. And then you can go back to, the 1400s, the 1300s, we can go in centuries, instead of the 11th century, which is 100s, and the 12th century, 13th century, kings and queens, power, the West, France, Denmark. Well, Denmark, yeah, eventually got into all that stuff. England or Britain, Ireland. And if you know anything about mythology, then you would know before that goes into paganism, which, for the record, to all those atheists out there, I respect you, because when you do see these patterns, it does make you question. These are human based religions. Human based religions. Even though in some of these Christianity or Christian beliefs, they want you to give up that humanity, they need you to be saved. That's all Protestant about, this being saved. Your soul has to be saved, because, and then not everything else, it denies your humanity. Or they go too far with humanity, with original sin, saying, oh, we're all human, we all sin, just repent. To me personally, I think it's crap. I've always thought it was crap. My soul has been saved. Sorry. I actually want to tell y'all a story of some of these Protestant based religions. And it was when I was in California. I've been wanting to tell the story for a while, because I'm not alone in it, but this person's not in my life anymore to even really speak on it. But if he sees it, yeah, man, I got to tell the story. So before I move out there, I was warned um, by who became my husband at the time. He's like, hey, I just want to let you know, it's kind of crazy out west. It's very crazy out west. Every time I turn around, some crazy asshole is telling me that I need to be saved and blah, 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 blah. And I'm not going to tell you his business, because that was his story. And at first, when pertaining to me, I'm like, yeah, it can't be that bad. It can't be that bad. It can't be that bad. No, it really was that bad. One story in particular, I was pumping gas, and or my ex-husband was pumping gas, and I can't remember why I got out of the car. I think he was being harassed by somebody, and I came out, and he had a strong argument, given that, but it was the first time I saw it. And I was like, oh my God, bro, you're not wrong. I didn't say bro, but this is what I'm saying 20 some years later. Like, wow, man, I can't believe that, you were right. And then fast forward, I can't remember where I was. I may have been at the mall or somewhere, just living life. And I would always have people come up to me, excuse me, ma'am or miss, but have you been saved by Jesus Christ? Have you repented? And, for your soul, so your soul could be saved by Jesus Christ. Now, I just want to clear something up. These weren't Jehovah Witnesses, right? I got my own story for Jehovah Witnesses, actually a pretty positive one when I was first introduced. But this, I was like, excuse me, and then usually with Jehovah Witnesses was always kind of the ones in the moment that are, trying to convert or whatever. I would always say I'm Catholic, and they would say, okay, thank you. And then they would keep going. Even knocking on our door, I never really had a thing about it until many years later. But because eventually I did have bad experiences. But in the beginning, it was like, wow, you're not jumping down my throat, blah, blah, blah. These people in the mall, in the gas station, a museum, I think we were in Balboa Park, and just randomly people were coming up and asking us this question, and they wouldn't go away when I would say that when I would say I was Catholic. They would actually push it. And then I remind you, I was in my very early 20s. I think I was 21, 22 by this point. And we were kids, and we started messing with them. Okay. But karma kind of kicked us in the face later. I would think I was like a year and a half later. So I was there for about little over 2 years. And we got our first apartment where it was just him and I, and we didn't have roommates. And it wasn't in the best part of town in San Diego. It was in Imperial Beach, but it worked, whatever. The house, okay, it's going to be funny because I was hella pissed. And I even actually remember writing a song about this back in the day, right? It had to have been where our apartment was, right? It had to have been like an old hotel, because it had a courtyard. And in the courtyard, it looked like there used to be a pool that was filled in by dirt. And it was like when you walk into the courtyard, it was like a square, right? And there's apartments all through it. And then in the middle is where this pool, I guess, used to be. Um, we lived like kind of in the long, like part of the long L, right? And then there was a corner right here and then corner. So more like a rectangle than a square. These people lived right across the courtyard. And when they moved in, they were very loud, like very loud. And it was like, okay, whatever. Sometimes you have loud neighbors and it's hard to whatever. And our neighbors in this complex were actually really not nice people. We didn't get along with most of them, even the people right next door. And that's another conversation. But these people that had just moved in that were very loud, they every Sunday they would have about 20 people over. Now, my apartment was a one bedroom, and there was no bigger apartment in that place that had more than 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, because it was a very small complex. Even if it was a 3 bedroom apartment, I don't think 20 some people to 25 to 30 people could really fit. So, what they started doing is they started having their prayer meetings outside, or church gathering, right, in their home. So for about 8 to 10 hours, all you would hear is tambourines going and singing praise and all this other stuff. So what does a 22-year-old kid do? My ex-husband was roughly around 23, 24 years old, so he was also very, very young. We started blasting the most obnoxious metal that you could possibly listen to. As a matter of fact, it was black metal. And it was like, because that's what my ex used to listen to, or I think still does. It's never changed. And it was like, it wasn't just American black metal. If you know anything about heavy metal, then you would know that a lot of black metal comes from like Sweden and Denmark and even Ireland and mostly Scandinavia, right? And it was hilarious to see their reaction because they could be as loud as they wanted to be, but we were not allowed to even come close to being loud, to where we started opening up all of our windows and all of our doors because, to be very real with you guys, the point that I'm trying to make is you never shove something down someone's throat. And that's exactly what was happening in California at that time, is that these crazy Christians, I met Mormons for the first time, a girl that I had met, pretty fucking cool. She was covered in tattoos, which was really odd because she was Mormon, but she was cool as shit. She was in college. Her dad was like some famous pastor or whatever. I wish I could remember her name, but this is well over 20 years ago. And I met another girl who, I think I've talked about this actually in the other episodes. Her name is Selena, and she was awesome. And I wish I could remember her last name. Her mom was on the elder. She was an elder for the Jehovah. So I had a chance to actually sit down and have a real good conversation with her about Jehovah and what it was like being Jehovah. So yeah, I might have strong opinions against the loud Christians, which is Pentecostal and Baptist. And I think they were like a form of Baptist, is that little, church people. I'm not quite sure, but the whole being saved thing and shoving it down people's throats has been happening for a very, very long time. This is early 2000s. I was in California due to the Iraqi war right after 9/11. So that's why I was there. My ex was Navy. So this is in the middle of a war. As a matter of fact, he was very lucky not to go over, but anytime you go into downtown San Diego, it was strange because all you would see is women and children. So these people would actually kind of target that. They would say a woman, they would see women and children and whatever. And my point, not my point, but one of the points I'm trying to make is that when these types of people, I'm not saying all Christians either, just to make that clear, these people that are trying to get you to convert, when it becomes nefarious and diabolical, is when they start to target or convince people who are vulnerable. That's really where I start to have real issues because it's very easy to say no. I know I did. I was a young kid, so in many ways, maybe I was sarcastic and kind of an asshole about it, but they were not very kind to us. So therefore, I stopped giving kind reactions because I realized even that kindness, they weren't even getting through their head that to say that I'm not interested. And the fact that I would say that I was Catholic wouldn't even bother, it didn't even, they didn't care. Hey, how about we convert you to a different religion? It's bullshit. I'm already one. At least Jehovah's, they have a bad rap, but at least they would always leave me the hell alone. And at least I would always have a conversation up until recently in this last couple years. But they weren't devout Jehovah's either, but they were ex Jehovah's. But even the ones that were in would actually be like, respectfully so, because they know how strong Catholics can be. We're, hate to say it, but next to Muslims and Jews, we're the OGs. Sorry. We long before Protestant religion, and I'm not saying one is better than the other, just saying in general. Okay. At least Catholicism has history based facts. Not all of them, but at least it can coincide right next to reading the pyramids or bringing up or finding old things that deal with the Roman Empire, the original Roman Empire, like during that time period of the Roman Empire and when Jesus was supposed to be on the earth. Don't forget, the Roman Empire is the one who crucified him. So, yeah, at least we've got that. Everything else, is our own history. And, but if I had to choose between any of them, I know more about Catholicism than I do Judaism and also with the Muslim religion. But if I had to choose between those three OGs, I would choose Catholicism because at least most Catholics, devout Catholics, are accountable for what they've done in the past. They know they didn't do it, but they understand and at least take accountability that these things have happened. And now, so many people can argue me with this because I'm not saying any of it is okay. I'm just saying it's been acknowledged and they're trying to do their best they can to move forward. Whereas a lot of these other ones don't take accountability. They fight it. They try to hide everything. Catholic Church does hide things too. But and I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. Too many human beings have died in the counts of billions over this fucking argument. I'm just trying to show you when people get so far into their psychosis or their delusion that they fight you so hard. Now, that story that I was telling you about in California, that's delusion, in my opinion. Okay, these people were very delusional and they weren't harming anyone. So, in my opinion, that wasn't really a psychosis. And honestly, I wasn't really knocking on their damn door to find out if they truly were psychotic or not, because, if my at the time, if my husband did get sent overseas, then, I had to live there. I eventually, to be real, I eventually just started flying home every time he would have his stuff because I just didn't want to be alone in that crazy, crazy situation. Anyways, yeah. So this is just my thoughts on what we've or what I've presented to you, to the world, kind of leading up to this stuff. Um, but coming or moving forward, I'm going to keep having warnings. It's going to get more and more disturbing where actual life is lost and how far these things go and how far human beings can take it when they're so far in their own psychosis, in their own delusion, that they start believing that they're prophets and they start believing that they are sent only by God and it's only up to them. It's very, this word's been thrown around so much, so I'm trying to stay away from it, but it's the true definition of narcissism. And you don't actually need to see this shit in religion. You can see it in any corporation, any place where there's large gatherings of people, large followings. I mean, I honestly think even some influencers, they're so far in their narcissism and so far in their own psychosis that, you know, you see it on TikTok too. Witch Talk is actually the other one that's kind of funny to kind of watch. A lot of them have crossed over into Christianity and given up witchcraft, which, whatever your beliefs are out there, some might say, oh, thank goodness, or thank God they came to the light. Well, actually, they never actually were in true witchcraft. They were in something else that they thought that they believed was witchcraft, which, in my opinion, is still part of psychosis. Anything can turn into a psychosis. Anything. So I'm going to end it here because I'm at 26 minutes. I'm not sure if I'm going to post this because this really is a tangent video. But yeah, coming up here very soon, I'm going to be taking you through the journey of I've been promising Waco. It's here. I'm going to take you through that beginning steps of Waco and what happened and Dave Koresh and his organization and whatnot. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because this is the last time since 2026, if we're looking at it currently right now, you go all the way back to Waco, which was in the early 90s. It's the first time we ever saw the government and religion kind of square off. Except for now in 2026, it's the opposite, where the government now, with this administration that we have, is now on the side of religion. But I'm going to show you or go through why they had to step in, why they felt the need. Now, it was a colossal fail of how they handled it. But then I'm going to take into another situation where they start to handle these properly. We don't see this anymore because the ADF and the FBI are not run the way that they used to be in me growing up, because everything has changed. There's been a lot of firing and new people and everything else. And we're experiencing and we're seeing all these crazy things, right? All in the name of religion. Schools are changing out west. They're incorporating the Bible, their version of the Bible, into school systems. It's starting to bleed through into the First Amendment and of the Constitution. And I got this little guy right here to even kind of go through the explanation of that, because gun laws were tied to Waco. What you're allowed to have on a personal front, all that stuff comes up. And then to show you what happens when a human being is so deep in their psychosis of belief that they think that they get these paranoid delusions that things are going to happen, and things played out so awfully because of consequences, because of this person's actions. Now, I think prior to, okay, let's pretend that here in 2026, it was like how it was in the 90s, okay? Actually, I can't remember where I was going on with that thought. But yeah, so these cases or incidences or cult leaders that I'm going to introduce you to Waco's first. How does it tie into one of the first biggest terrorist attacks on our own soil? And no, I'm not talking about 9/11. Everybody remembers 9/11. I get that. Please don't ever forget and don't ever push it away like we have with Waco. A lot of people don't talk about it anymore because they're either not old enough or they just don't want to remember or they don't want to see that correlation. But it is definitely tied to with our government and with religion. So much so that another one I'm going to mention, I'm not going to say their name yet, how they actually bring up David Koresh, and they actually bring up the fact of how it was a colossal fail. And they knew, this occult leader knew that it wouldn't happen again, and it didn't. And how that person was taken to jail is how we're supposed to do things in 2026, but we don't. It doesn't seem to be happening. So we, whatever. I actually don't know why, but I just noticed it doesn't happen. And if you ever decide to go down this rabbit hole for yourself, you'll notice in the 1980s and the 1990s, there were so many cults that did not end the way they didn't end softly. Like Hillsong, that's just one soft. That's probably the most light version of what I'm going to be walking into or introducing you guys to, because it gets, like I said, it gets more disturbing and more lives are lost. And that one that I had mentioned with that one cult leader, and not David Koresh, but that brought up David Koresh, lives were lost. Okay. So, and the other two that I'm going to be heavily talking about is Mother Anna and Pastor Tiffany Irwin. Now, Tiffany Irwin is a lot like Charles Manson. She was able to share her psychosis and convince people of their delusion that they need to harm people. And that's exactly what happened, except for it was two boys under the age of 18. And what they did to him, both of them, was so horrific. One of them died. The other one is still living, and I'm going to go through it. So, thanks for joining me for this little intermission. If you've listened to me this far, cheers. I hope to see you again. Please, please, please do not forget to hit that like button. Please subscribe, and leave me a comment. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know your thoughts. Just remember to please be kind. I will be kind to you. Just please be kind to me. But how I've said on even on my TikTok channels, there's a difference between being nice and there's a difference between being kind. I'm a very kind person, but I'm not always nice. So please just stay kind. Okay. On that note, cheers, guys. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.